ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
It's one of the biggest unions in the country, representing tens of thousands of Australian workers. But can the CFMEU survive after allegations of corruption and ties to criminal underworld figures and bikies? And what does the scandal say about the lawlessness in the construction industry? Today, Victoria's state political reporter, Richard Willingham, takes us through the extraordinary allegations. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal Land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Richard, underworld figures, organised crime, bikies, gangsters, this story, it really does have it all, doesn't it?
It feels like something out of Hollywood almost,
yes,
doesn't it?
It's
It's got every element.
Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen has asked the police and the state's corruption watchdog to investigate allegations the construction branch of the CFMEU has had underworld figures and bikies profit from major public building projects.
It's alleged senior bikie figures and other criminals were given high-paid union jobs. It's also alleged that CFMEU officials advised building companies to hire subcontractors controlled by bikie gangs.
Central to it is the allegation that the CFMEU's construction division, particularly in Victoria, has been infiltrated by known underworld figures, crime figures, who some have left prison, some are, have been targets in the past, and they are working as CFMEU delegates on major construction sites. And some of these major construction sites, it's alleged, are what's called the big build in Victoria. The Victorian government is spending tens of billions of dollars on building infrastructure projects, and the CFMEU workers are delivering these projects. It's quite extraordinary, some of the allegations.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, so criminals are allegedly working on projects which are funded by the Victorian government. So criminals were making money from taxpayers. That's the allegation, right?
Well, it's part of it, yeah. But it's not just that. I think the other concerning thing that is being aired is the fact that subcontractors who aren't aligned with the CFMEU are being locked out of work. They're being harassed and bullied if they are on building sites. And then there's this allegation that to get that sort of friend relationship with the CFMEU requires kickback. So it really does have it all.
So basically, the investigation by Nine's newspapers and 60 Minutes uncovered allegations of misconduct, including, and not only, that senior bikie figures and convicted criminals were being parachuted into lucrative union roles. It's almost unbelievable. As you say, you'd watch it on a film in Hollywood. So a key player in all of this, Richard, is John Setka. Who is he exactly? He has a very colourful past, doesn't he?
Very colourful past, larger than life sort of figure. John Setka's he's a big physical man, and he's been leader of the CFMEU's construction division for a very long time, more than a decade. Just last month, CFMEU workers won a 20% pay rise.
We have workers that have not been paid for 9 weeks. What an absolute disgrace in this day and age, and all they do is just keep attacking the CFMEU.
Now, he was due to stand down at the end of this year. His term was up and he wasn't recontesting, but he shocked everyone on Friday when he announced that he was resigning for the sake of the union amid all these what he called malicious allegations that hadn't yet been aired but had been put to him as part of Nine's investigation. He's never been far from the headlines. He's outspoken, he's militant. I mean, Anthony Albanese got him kicked out of the Labor Party several years ago.
I mean, I have contempt for someone like John Setka. He has no legitimate role in the union movement.
So just tell me and remind me, what's he actually accused of? Because some of his behaviour that has come out in this reporting is really, really strange.
Yeah, it's accusing him of sort of, I guess, one, allowing it to happen under his watch, but also the fact that the Nine papers allege that John Setka left a threatening message on a suitcase at a rival unionist's house, and it was caught on CCTV. And he, being the leader, is the one that sort of is the fingers pointed at him for allowing this sort of culture to take root and flourish.
Mm. So, Richard, just before we go on, just remind me what the CFMEU is. How big is it as a union? How powerful is it?
The CFMEU is massive. It's the big building construction union. So it's a big, powerful union, provides a lot of money to the Labor Party just through its sheer size, through donations and affiliation fees. And its members, it's the workers are building so many government projects. They are, they have a phrase, particularly in Melbourne, is, on their T-shirts and their jumpers, it's, "We built this city." They say you can't get anything done without CFMEU support.
So it's a big, powerful union representing thousands and thousands of Australians. So, Richard, John Setka, he's gone. But how has the national leadership of the union responded to these allegations?
Well, they've taken over the Victorian branch. They'll be running that, and they said they're going to hold an independent investigation. But Zach Smith, who's the National Secretary, has sort of been talking to this. And he stressed that these are just allegations and everyone is entitled to, the process and the presumption of innocence. He's also pretty much praised John Setka. He said, he leaves behind a great legacy and workers love him.
Do you accept that John Setka has shamed your union?
No, I don't. I don't accept he's shamed my union.
Did you see that footage of him delivering a suitcase with the word dog on it? Did you see that?
I did see that.
And what did you think of it?
I was shocked. I was surprised. It's not something I would have done, and I'm sure, John probably regrets it, but I'll let John Setka, now as the private citizen and no longer the secretary of the branch, speak for himself.
There's some politics there, which I think is why we're hearing, the federal government basically say this does not go far enough. Simply placing him to administration does not go far enough. We know that Tony Burke has flagged that they're even considering deregistering the CFMEU.
That's what Susan Lee, the acting leader of the federal opposition, wants to do.
It's not good enough to just wave it away and say we'll leave it to party officials, we'll leave it to someone else somewhere else. This action needs to be taken immediately, and it can be taken immediately.
But can that actually be done? Is it actually possible just to get rid of it?
I think the federal government has power to do these sort of things. Certainly, Tony Burke has been considering it. The ACTU have sort of pushed back on that, saying that would be bad for workers.
So the idea of deregistration, I believe, would run counter to an outcome that would deliver a union that's in the construction industry, that's functioning well and that stands up to criminal elements.
But what about in Victoria? Because that's where the pressure really is at the moment. How has the Victorian Labor government been reacting, and the Premier, Jacinta Allan? She's under huge pressure, I would have thought, at this point.
I think this is the biggest challenge for Jacinta Allan's time as Premier. She took over from Daniel Andrews in September last year, and this is really her first big political scandal. And, people may ask, well, this is a union problem, but this has happened on Victorian government building sites, and there has been complaints. We now know complaints have been made to the Premier, Jacinta Allan, particularly when she was Transport Minister. So before she became Premier, she was in charge. She was the Minister in charge of all these big projects. Complaints were made to her about some of the way that subcontractors were being treated by the CFMEU.
As Minister and now as Premier, I have always acted when concerns have been raised with me. Last year, I was advised by the Major Transport Infrastructure Authority, who were anecdotally aware of possible criminal incidences on work sites here in Victoria. As I was aware of those alleged incidences, I also wrote to the Chief Commissioner of Police to directly raise those matters with him. And I do.
It's going to really test her. She has referred it to the Victorian Independent Broad-Based Anti-Corruption Commissioner, IBAC. She's also referred it to Victoria Police. She wants the CFMEU to be suspended from the Victorian Labor Party branch. And she really wants to work with the federal government in this industrial law space to actually have a look at some of these EBAs that have been struck between companies and the union to see if they were done properly. And she even said she'd go as far as terminating some of those EBAs, which would be a massive, massive call because it would affect the wages and conditions of thousands of workers, tens of thousands of workers building Victorian government projects.
All right, so there is concern about enterprise bargaining agreements that are already in place for these workers on these construction sites. So it's pretty clear, I think, Richard, that Labor wants to distance itself from this scandal. But can Labor really distance itself? Because aren't Labor and the unions entwined? Or in the view of voters, they are, aren't they?
Well, the Labor Party is formed as the party of the workers from the union movement, and it's part of their DNA, if you like. They will try and distance themselves. I was at the Labor State Conference in May, and the CFMEU were ever present, as they're entitled to be as members of the Labor Party. So it's going to be hard, and breaking up is hard, as they say.
Yes.
Perhaps it indicates why they haven't acted up until now, because it was too hard, and now they're being forced to act, and it looks pretty bad for the government.
Sure does. All right. Well, as we've discussed, Richard, one option here is to get rid of this union altogether. That's a pretty fast and easy way to clean it up, that's for sure. But what about all those workers who rely on its representation? What happens to them if that's the ultimate action that's taken?
I mean, that's the big question that no one who's proposing this has actually come up with a solution. Workers need a workplace agreement. They need that to get paid and to have their conditions. So you can't imagine it being drastic in that sense. It's really messy for them, and I think they'd risk frustrating the entire Labor movement too. There is that union solidarity, I think, that would be tested. Union membership is declining, but the construction union is one of the biggest unionised workforce. So, for lack of a better expression, watch this space.
Richard Willingham is Victoria's state political reporter for the ABC based in Melbourne. This episode was produced by Oscar Coleman with audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. To get in touch with the team, please email us on ABC News Daily at abc.net.au. Thanks for listening.